Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I told you that I would be eventually sharing my labor and delivery story, so today is that day. There's really nothing super crazy about my story. I'm just sharing my story because I said I would, and if you're anything like me, then you love hearing these stories and all the details about women going into labor. Hopefully you'll be a little bit entertained, if not a little bit educated at the same time. So let's just jump right into it. So my daughter's due date was February 3rd, 2019. Spoiler alert, she was born on February 2nd, so she was born the day before her due date. Overall, I had a pretty easy pregnancy. It was really smooth. I actually loved being pregnant. I would say that my first trimester was actually the hardest. I was just super tired, constantly wanting to take a nap. I completely stopped going to the gym, and I would get headaches very often. Not so much nauseousness. There were a couple times, especially when I was flying, where I would feel a little nauseous, but I would just suck on a mint or something and I would be totally fine. But I never got to the point where I was actually, hurling or anything like that. So overall, really smooth pregnancy. But of course, towards the last few weeks of my pregnancy, I started to get a little impatient, as most women do when they're nearing their due date. So Daniel and I started talking about doing all of these different things to help encourage Layla to come out and join us in the real world. So a week before our due date, obviously premature, we went to Skipolini's to try out their famous Prego pizza. If you guys haven't heard of their Prego pizza or of Skipolini's, they actually have this pizza that has a reputation for putting women into labor. So the story started with this woman who came in. She was ready to give birth, pretty sure she was past her due date, and she told the chef, "Serve me whatever will make me have this baby tonight." And he pretty much concocted this pizza with 13 different ingredients, extra onion, extra garlic, all that good stuff. And she had a decent helping of the pizza, and she actually went into labor later that night. And you can go onto their website at Skipolini's. I'll actually link it down below if you guys are curious. But you can go to their website and read all of their success stories about women that have gone to try out this Prego pizza and actually did go into labor either that day or the next morning, something of that sort. So we decided to try it out. Again, we were a week before our due date, but we decided to try it out anyway, just to see what all the fuss was about. Pizza was pretty good. I'm not even really that much of a pizza lover, but it was pretty good. Didn't go into labor. Again, she was born a day before her due date, and we were having this pizza a week before. So no surprise there, but it didn't work. And then I also really wanted to get a mani-pedi before I gave birth, because I was thinking, who knows when I'm gonna be able to go get my nails done after having a baby. I'm probably never gonna be able to do anything ever again, right? So I wanted to get it done before she came. And when I was talking to some girlfriends of mine, someone mentioned that getting a pedicure could actually put you into labor because of the way they massage your feet. They hit some kind of pressure point a certain way or something, and it induces labor. I decided, why not? I'm ready for her to come anyway. Let's get this mani-pedi. So I wanted to get it done because I wanted to get my nails done, not because I was trying to induce labor. But I figured that was just a bonus if that ended up happening. So I got my nails done. I got my pedicure with a little foot rub and everything. Still no baby. Okay. Another suggestion to help induce labor is to eat spicy foods. Maybe because it starts like a little fire in your belly and it encourages the baby to run out of you. I don't know. So on the morning of January 31st, Daniel and I were just hanging out in the office, both working on our computers, and I felt her kicking. She was a very active baby in my belly, but that day, for some reason, it just felt different. And then I told Daniel, she's telling me something. I think she's gonna come either today or tomorrow. That's what I told him, January 31st. Again, she was born on the 2nd, so she was born 2 days later, but I was still pretty accurate, because what happened later that day, we went to get spicy sushi. We went to dinner pretty late that night, maybe around 9:30 we went to dinner. And when we got there, when we got to our table, before I even sat down, I felt like a little leak. And I was like, okay, maybe I just peed myself, because it happens when you're pregnant. You're gonna pee yourself. And if you didn't know that now and be prepared for it. It happens. So I wasn't sure if I peed myself. I didn't feel like I had to pee, but I decided to go to the restroom and just double check anyway. So before I even sat down, I walked over to the restroom and I tried to pee to see if I had, a full bladder, and didn't even realize it. Nothing came out. So I said, okay, maybe there's a chance that my water could have broke. But I was like completely in denial. Only about like 15% of women actually experience their water breaking before going into labor. The other 85% of women go into active labor, and then the nurses have to break the amniotic sac for them because it doesn't break on its own. Of course, we were like, well, then that's not going to happen to us. Like, our water is not going to break. So I kind of just was like, okay, I, rolled up some tissue, put it in my pants, and hoped for the best. I figured it was just a little leak, nothing serious. I walked back over to the table, sat down, and told Daniel, I think my water could have broken, but I'm not really sure. So, not being sure, we just proceeded to order our food, have our spicy sushi, which wasn't even that spicy to begin with, ordered our drinks, we sat through our meal. Maybe a couple times during the dinner, there was a couple feelings of like a little bit more leaking, but I can't really recall. I'm telling the story more than a year later now, mind you. But when I stood up from the table, I felt a leak for sure. And it wasn't just like a trickle, it was like a leak. And I started getting really nervous. Not so nervous that my water broke, but more nervous that I didn't want to cause a scene and leave a mess in the restaurant. So I was kind of like trying to hurry us out of there. The waitress was talking to us and asking when I was due. Little did she know that my water was leaking right in front of her. But I would try to very slyly look back at my seat or underneath me to see if I had left a trail or any kind of notation that something is going on with me. So I hurried Daniel out of the restaurant. I said, okay, come on, we have to go. We walk out of there, and walking towards the car, it had evolved from the trickle to the leak, and now it was like gushes. Like, that's what it felt like. It was like gushes, and there were multiple. It would happen like every other step. And I said, oh my God, okay, for sure my water broke. We need to do something. I finally make it to the car without, leaving a whole river behind me. So what we read is that if you want to make sure that your water broke, you should lay down for 30 minutes, because then it'll just pool inside of you. And once you stand up, then it'll just all flow out. So we decided to drive home, not to the hospital. We lived maybe 5 or 10 minutes away from the restaurant. We lived in an apartment on the 2nd floor, and we had to park in the lot in front of our apartment, but it was across, how there's 2 sides that you can park in, right? We park over here, and we still have to walk across the little lot and then upstairs to our apartment. But the car ride was fine. I was definitely wet down there, sitting down in the car. But when I got out of the car to walk to the apartment, again, it was just gush after gush. Every step or every other step I was taking, and I was literally doing the little pee-pee dance. Well, it looked like the pee-pee dance because I was trying to make it across the lot with my knees together, my legs squeezing together, me holding my crotch because it just would not stop. It wasn't a constant flow the whole time, but it was a gush, and then I would take a step, and then another gush. And I'm not even kidding you. This is what was happening, and I was like cracking up out of like ridiculousness for the situation. And I could not stop laughing, and I told Daniel, I was like, oh my god, okay, I can't even make it. Finally made it upstairs. I immediately went to our bed to lay down while Daniel called the labor and delivery department and told them what was going on with me to see if they wanted us to come in. Pretty quickly, the nurse was convinced that my water broke. I went to the bathroom, I like lined my underwear with multiple pads because it was so ridiculous. I even brought a towel to sit on in the car. That's how bad it was. We get to the hospital. Same thing happens when I'm walking from the parking lot to the labor and delivery department, but this time, like, it's not even funny anymore. It's so ridiculous that I've gotten like so frustrated, and I was seriously getting like pissed off. I was feeling like I would have much rather had this crazy dramatic one giant waterfall in a public space with everyone around me kind of movie-like scenario than to have what was happening to me then with all of these mini waterfalls over and over and over again. Like, it was ridiculous. But we managed to make it. It's the labor and delivery department. They sat me down. They made sure that my water broke. It broke, obviously. And they wanted to double check to see if there was any infections or anything like that. So what happens is that once your water breaks, and if you're not in active labor yet, then you can have the option to go home for 24 hours to get some more rest, or just enjoy being home before you have to be stuck in the hospital until the baby comes out. So after she checked that everything was okay with me, there were no infections, I still had like enough fluids and all that, they sent us home. And now it's probably like midnight-ish by the time we get home, I believe. I decide to shower. I feel so gross. I've pretty much been peeing on myself for the past few hours. And I lay in bed and I cannot sleep. Like, I was planning to shower, get some rest, be well rested before this baby comes out, because who knows when you're gonna get a full night's rest ever again, right? I lay there, Daniel's laying next to me, and I just start like stressing out about when I'm gonna go into labor and what it's gonna be like. More importantly, the when part, because I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm gonna go into active labor when it's like 6:30 a.m. It's peak traffic time, and we live in Concord and our hospital is in Walnut Creek, and even though that's not technically that far, with the traffic, it will take forever for us to get there, and I do not want to be screaming in the car, trying to hold on to everything that I could possibly hold on to, wanting to get out of my seatbelt, wanting to jump out of the car, and then not being able to hold her inside of me, and we'll have to pull over, and the cop's gonna have to come and deliver our baby on the freeway. These were literally the thoughts that were going through my head. So I tell Daniel, you know, I would feel so much more comfortable if we just went back to the hospital right now. I would just feel comfortable knowing that I have that extra support if I needed it, if I do go into active labor. I felt really bad because I knew he wasn't gonna get any sleep either then. But we got up and we made it back to the hospital. It was about 3 a.m. by the time we got back, and when we walked in, the nurses were making comments like, oh my gosh, you guys are back already? Like, I would have stayed home as long as I could. But no, I'd rather have you guys here, you know, to save my life or put me out of my misery if needed. They got me settled in to one of their delivery rooms, and they got my IV all set up. And once we were a little bit settled and I was able to fall asleep for a little bit, not too long, maybe a couple hours max. And then I finally did start going into active labor, and I did start feeling the contractions. And when they first checked how dilated I was 3 centimeters, which wasn't too much, but I could definitely feel the contractions, and they were definitely very strong already. And I was doing everything that I could to deal with the pain throughout that morning. You know, I would try sitting in different positions, and I was standing up and leaning on Daniel, and I was trying to walk around. It was in my birth plan that I didn't want to get an epidural. It was going to be the very last resort. So, you know, I tried to go as long as I could. When I, you know, had a little chance to just sit down and relax a little bit in between contractions, I texted my family, I updated them, you know, like, we're in the hospital again. We're currently 3 centimeters. And, you know, like, I'll update you whenever anything else happens. So that was in the morning. And then, you know, the whole day kind of it's just the same, like, drawn out process. Me still trying to cope with the pain and trying to avoid the epidural. But eventually, maybe early afternoon, got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I can't deal with this pain anymore. Like, I need something, give me something. So knowing that I didn't want the epidural, the nurses suggested that I take fentanyl, which is this drug that they can put into my drip IV thing, whatever it's called. And it like makes you a little woozy, like it takes the edge off. And so they gave me a dose of that, and I felt it like immediately, and it was amazing. And I remember as soon as they gave it to me, I looked at Daniel and I was like, oh yeah, I feel it, it's coming. And then I knocked out right away, and then I was like asleep for like 2 hours. And then after seeing how easily it knocked me out after that first dose, I woke up and I was like, yeah, just keep giving me that. That's awesome. Like, I accept. Give me a second dose. And they gave me a second dose, and of course I feel nothing from the second dose. My body has become completely immune to it already, which was a total bummer. So in the end, I ended up agreeing to the epidural. And mind you, we've only made it to 3.5 centimeters now. And honestly, even before the process even began, my mind just started running wild, and I started freaking out. And getting that epidural was like the scariest moment of my life. And I could not help but to just start crying out of complete fear. And I was just absolutely terrified. So I'm just crying my eyes out. There's tears running all down my face, total snot coming out of my nose. And I'm just hunched over crying, apparently super silently, because nobody realized how hard I was crying, or that I was even crying. Daniel had no idea I was crying. But then again, the nurse was standing right in front of me, so she probably blocked his view of me. She told me that actually they usually ask everyone to leave the room just so I can focus and everyone can focus, because you have to be completely still when you're getting an epidural. But yeah, I was just like leaking everywhere, and it wasn't until after the fact that she finally like looked at me and was like, oh my god, you're leaking like a little faucet, you poor thing. And she finally got me some tissues. You have to like hold on to a pillow and like just hug the pillow, hunched over, and she was just standing there in front of me to hold on to me and let me hold on to her as tight as I needed to hold on to her. And really, really sweet. I wish I could remember her name, but I'm just bad with names in general. But she was absolutely amazing. The epidural itself, like the needle, didn't really hurt. It was just like a little pinch, but it wasn't the pain that really terrified me. It was what could happen from getting an epidural that that made me cry so hard. Like, I had talked to several women prior, and a lot of them said they could still feel where they got their epidural after so much time has passed since they've had the baby, which to me is crazy. And then honestly, like real honestly, I was like, what if I get paralyzed? I was thinking of all the extremes that could happen for me getting this epidural. And there were just other reasons why I didn't want to get one to begin with. I mean, for the obvious fact that it could affect the baby, and then also because once you get the epidural, you have to stay in bed for the remainder of your labor. You can't get up and walk around, which is what I really wanted to do to help kind of just ease myself into the situation and deal with everything, like deal with the pain and the stress of being in labor. And then also, once you have your epidural, you can't eat anything. You have to stay strictly on fluids. But even just like the small chances of anything like extreme happening as a consequence of me getting my epidural, that is what truly, truly terrified me. And I don't mean to scare any of you that are considering it, but I'm just giving you like my real thoughts during this process. But I got it over with, and honestly, now for all of my future pregnancies, like I'm for sure getting an epidural. I think epidurals are awesome, and like you can't feel anything down there. It's incredible. So yes, terrified at first, but now I'm all for it. The reason why like you can't get up or anything once you get your epidural is after they take the needle out, they actually have this like skinny little tube that stays inside your back, like inside your spine, that's constantly feeding you this drug to numb you. That's why it's so amazing, and you don't feel anything. But it's all like gravity based, so you have to be like leaned back, but you can't lay like completely flat because it needs to go to the lower half of your body. And then you also have to like be leaned on a certain side, and after like 30 minutes or an hour or so, the nurse comes in and like rotates you so you don't over bake or whatever phrase they use, something about baking too much on one side. And then you also get a little button in case you want to give yourself like a couple extra doses, but it is regulated. You can't give yourself too much. You can only use it a certain amount of times in a certain amount of time. That makes sense, but that button definitely got a lot of love from me that day. So I was in bed, I had my epidural, I had my catheter, I, was laying there, everything was good. I was finally able to relax more once I got the epidural. And again, I was still only like 3.5 centimeters. So that just goes to show how low of a tolerance I have for pain, because that's like kind of ridiculous. And I know people are probably judging me out there because that's like nothing to some women, but all women are different. So, whatever, whenever you decide to get your epidural, that's completely up to you. It's your body. You do what you need to do. And I will continue to get my epidurals even at 3 centimeters. Later on that afternoon, maybe around 4 p.m. or so, we hear a knock on the door. And then we assume it's just going to be another nurse coming in to check on me. But it was actually my family that walked in. My mom, my brother, my sister, and her boyfriends, they came in and they had balloons and flowers and everything. And they were like, well, you hadn't texted us since this morning, so we assumed that like maybe you had the baby. And I thought it was funny because I was like, I just haven't texted you to update you on anything because there has been nothing to update you on. I'm still here stuck at 3.5 centimeters, just like we've been since this morning, and there's like nothing's changed. I'm nowhere near giving birth to this baby. So that was kind of funny. They got to hang out a bit, but it was really nice to see them, and that was sweet that they came on their own without me telling them, whether or not the baby had come. Fast forward through the day, not much going on. Everything was, pretty simple. No real complications. The only thing was that when I did have contractions, her heart rate would drop a little bit. And they weren't sure why that was happening, but they continued to give me fluids just in case. They didn't want to give me any drugs to help induce labor, even though it was taking so long. Towards the end of the night, they started testing it out and giving me like a couple doses here and there to try to induce labor. I can't remember what the drug was called, but they were just giving me a little bit of it at a time just to see how she would react to it and if her heart rate would drop even more now that I was on that drug. Like 11 p.m. I think, they check how far I've dilated again. And this time we've made it to a whopping 4 centimeters, you guys. We managed to make it 1 whole centimeter that day. Incredible, right? And I said, oh my goodness, we are gonna be here all day tomorrow again. She just doesn't want to come out. And then like in the wee hours of the morning, like 2:30, 3 o'clock-ish, I started feeling the pain like down in my lower right hip kind of area. And I was leaning on my left side, and I totally like forgot about this whole like gravity situation, but I just kept pushing the button like crazy because holy moly, like those were some sharp pains. And I had Daniel call the nurse and I said, they need to come do something because I feel this pain and it hurts and I want it to be numb again. So the nurses came in, they rotated me to my right side after I pushed that button 100 times. And finally the pain subsided. I was numb again. Everything was all good. But then I started feeling the super sharp pains right under my right boob, like right here. And I swear it felt like she was like kicking my ribs from the inside. And it was very, very sharp pain. So I told Daniel, I said, you need to call them again and have them like lay me all the way down because now the pain's up here and I need all of that drug to go up here and make me numb till here. So he called them, the nurses came in and she said, well, we need to check, you know, how far you've dilated anyway, so why don't we just do that? And before they adjust me in my bed or anything, they check to see the progress we made. And she goes, well, you might as well just start pushing because the baby's here. And her head was already poking out of me when the nurses checked down there. Obviously, I had no idea. I felt nothing down there. It was just right here. It was just this little spot that I was trying to get rid of. So she told me I had to start pushing and I freaked out and I totally was not prepared for that. It was like 3:30 in the morning and at our last checkup, I was only 4 centimeters, for goodness sake. So I was not expecting that at all. Daniel was at my right side holding my hand. And I just started pushing. And every time I felt that contraction, oh my goodness. And that wasn't even like the full contraction because the rest of me was still pretty numb. But holy moly, if I didn't have that epidural, I would probably just continue to pass out because I don't think I'd be able to endure that pain for real. I was able to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, and she came out in 20 minutes. My beautiful girl. They say that for first time pregnancies, your first delivery could be like hours long. So 20 minutes is fantastic. My daughter probably knew that I don't do well with pain, so she wanted to put me out of my misery. Before the whole, there she was, she supposedly came out of me because Daniel was like, she's here, and I didn't hear anything. And I said, what's wrong with her? Like, why isn't she crying? And Daniel was like, nothing, she's just chilling, which apparently she was. And they took her and they put her on my chest and she was just chilling. Like, she wasn't crying at all. And she was already like, she already had a super strong neck and she was like lifting her neck up and like looking around like, where the hell am I? This isn't my mom's womb. But she was there and she was so beautiful. And it was amazing. It was incredible. I didn't get to see my placenta, which I was looking forward to. I didn't have any plans of taking it home with me and turning it into pills or anything like that. But I wanted to see it just to see what it looked like. But I did get to see my umbilical cord, and it was funny because when the nurses like went to like pick it up and cut it or whatever, well, Daniel got to cut it, but they picked up my umbilical cord and they were like amazed with it, and they were like, wow, like this is so textbook. And they had like the other nurses come, and the other nurses were like, I want to see, I want to touch it. It was so funny because it's like, it's an umbilical cord, but you know, that's part of their life. And then because of that, I guess if you don't have enough liquids, which is what they thought was the issue that was causing her to have her heart rate drop, then that would affect the way your umbilical cord looks. I don't know. I'm kind of just guessing. That's my assumption, because when they saw how textbook my umbilical cord was, they were like, I wonder why her heart rate kept dropping. And then someone was like, oh, she's just dramatic. And girl, Layla, she has her dramatic moments for sure. So they were right on the money with that. She definitely is a little dramatic baby sometimes. But yeah, there she was, born at 3:42 a.m. Layla Ray, at exactly 6 pounds, measuring at 19 inches. And thank God for the nurses, because as soon as they took her to go measure her, they were pushing Daniel to go take pictures of her. And he is not a picture taker really. And they were just like, go take pictures, take pictures, take pictures. And honestly, if they hadn't been constantly telling him to do that, he wouldn't have done that. But I am so thankful that they kept telling him to take pictures, because now we can see what she really looked like when she was first born. And she was super skinny, but she's just the most perfect little baby ever in the world. She's amazing. So that was my labor and delivery story. But afterwards, obviously, for being there for so long, your nurses rotate out and they introduce themselves and we introduce ourselves to them. And one of the nurses kept calling Daniel David, and like we didn't bother correcting her. It's no big deal, whatever. It's not hurting anyone. But she happened to be one of the nurses that was there when Layla was actually born, and she filled out baby's first impression, and she took Layla's little footprints. Look at how tiny they are. Layla Ray, who was born to Crystal and David. So the day she finds this, somewhere along her scrapbooks and her baby books, is gonna be an interesting day. But that was it for my labor and delivery story. If you're curious about breastfeeding, if you're curious about breastfeeding and all of that and how that went when she was born, I did a video on that a while back. I'll post a link to that in the description box below. But thank you guys so much for watching. Really, really appreciate you. Love you guys so much. Make sure you give this a huge thumbs up for Layla Ray. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification button. I do a bunch of baby videos, clothing hauls, DIYs. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I consider myself pretty much an open book. I'm down to answer most of your questions, if not all. But again, thanks so much for watching. Love you, and I will see you in the next video.